I'm standing in a clearing I promised myself I'd never see again. The tree looms taller than I remember, gnarled and twisted like it's been growing in pain. Its roots curl out like fingers, grasping at the damp earth as though clinging to something beneath. My boots sink slightly in the mossy ground, softened by recent rain. The air smells of rot and pine. Bramble growls low beside me. Her fur is bristled, ears forward, body tense. She doesn't bark, just stares, unmoving, like she's seen something I can't. Then she lunges toward the base of the tree. I grab her leash too late. Her paws are already clawing at the soil, dirt flying. She's frantic, whining now, snout, digging deep between thick, ancient roots. "Stop!" I yell, but my voice comes out hoarse, uncertain. She doesn't stop. She knows something is there, and maybe I do too. A whisper escapes me before I can stop it. I should have never. Come back. I hadn't planned to return, not to this place, not ever. I left 5 years ago and never looked back. Buried the memories like bones, hoping they'd stay buried. But grief doesn't rot. It waits. And when it calls with a voice you can't ignore. I'd lived in a cabin about a mile east of this clearing with my brother Daniel. Back then, I thought we were healing, in our own messed up way. We'd both had our share of darkness, Daniel more than me. His divorce had gutted him. He was all sharp edges and quiet silences for a long time. Didn't eat, didn't talk much. He mostly just stared at the fire like he was waiting for it to burn through him. That's when we found Sadie. She was a golden retriever, left at a kill shelter and heavily pregnant. I don't know what made me stop that day and look through the cage. She pressed her head to the bars like she knew I needed her as much as she needed me. Daniel was against it at first, but when Sadie waddled over to him, placed her head in his lap and let out the softest whine, he broke. He knelt on the floor, hugged her, and cried into her fur. She saved him. When the puppies came, 5 in total, it was like life returned. To the cabin. We built them a little whelping box. Stayed up nights watching over them. Daniel even named them after constellations. Sadie was the sun, and the pups her stars. That's what he said. And for a while, everything felt okay. But the peace didn't last. One night I came home late from town and the cabin was empty. No Sadie, no puppies, no Daniel. The only sign of life was the embers dying in the fireplace and Daniel's boots by the door. I searched for 2 weeks, called the sheriff, posted flyers, walked the woods until I could barely stand. Then one morning, I found them, Sadie and the pups, tied to this very tree, dead. Their bodies were already beginning to decay. Rain had washed away much of the blood, but not all of it. Ropes still knotted, cruelly around their necks. No signs of struggle, just silence, as if they had waited there, trusting until the end. I screamed until my voice broke, and then I left. Sold the cabin. Burned every photo, changed my number, left the state, but grief has long legs. A week ago, a letter showed up at my new apartment, no return address. Just my name, written in blocky, crooked script that reminded me of when Daniel used to carve. His initials into wood with a dull pocket knife. Inside was a single sentence. You need to see what he left behind. No signature. No instructions. Just that. I almost tossed it. But Bramble, my dog now, wouldn't stop staring at the envelope. Wouldn't touch her food that day. Just sat by the front door and stared. By nightfall, I was packing a bag. Now here, I am, back in these cursed woods. Bramble is still digging, her front paws muddy to the shoulder, whimpers rising in her throat like she's in pain. I kneel beside her and tug gently on her collar. "Hey," I murmur. "Easy. You're okay." She stops only when I touch her face. Her eyes flick to mine, desperate. She nudges the dirt again with her snout, and then I see it. Just a sliver of metal glinting under the soil. My breath catches. I dig with my hands, pushing aside cold earth until my fingers brush something cool, rusted. It's a dog tag, half covered in dirt, but unmistakable. Not Sadie's. This one's old, scratched. The engraving on one side is worn almost flat. I turn it over. My heart skips. On the back, crudely scratched with something sharp, are the words, "Watch the roots." The letters are jagged, familiar. Daniel's handwriting. The wind picks up. The air suddenly smells like burnt leaves and damp fur. Bramble starts whining again, louder this time, yanking toward the western edge of the clearing. She's trembling. "Come on," I whisper, tucking the tag into my jacket pocket. We follow the narrow deer path toward the creek bed. My flashlight flickers on and off, batteries already struggling against the cold. Bramble pauses often, sniffing the ground, tail low, almost tucked. She's afraid. The forest feels wrong, not dangerous exactly, just aware, like the trees are watching. We reach the creek, water sluggish and dark. Bramble sniffs the muddy bank and lets out a sharp bark. That's when I see them. Paw prints. Not fresh, but not old either. The mud holds them perfectly, only they're wrong. Too large, too deep. The spacing doesn't make sense. It walks like a dog, but drags something behind it. I kneel closer, shining my flashlight along the trail. The prints move in a circle, as if pacing, then stop at the edge of the water. There's no exit trail. Glance across the stream, nothing, but the hair on the back of my neck lifts. Bramble growls, a low rumble deep in her chest. I follow her gaze. On the far side of the stream, tucked just behind a veil of branches, something moves. A shape. It's gone before I can focus. My breath fogs in the air. I grip Bramble's leash tighter. "Let's go," I say, barely a whisper. We turn back, but the forest feels darker now, and behind me, just for a second, I hear it. A whimper. Small. Familiar. Like a puppy. I spent the night in the truck. Windows fogged, doors locked. Bramble curled tight in the passenger seat, but she didn't sleep. Not once. Every few minutes, her ears perked up, and her throat vibrated with a low, guttural growl. She stared into the woods, unblinking. At first, I chalked it up to old memories, or maybe a fox, or some other animal slinking between the trees. But then I heard it too. Soft, almost too faint to notice. A whine, not like Bramble's. Smaller, higher pitched, like a puppy. It came in waves, as if carried by the wind. I opened the window just a crack, holding my breath. It wasn't the trees, creaking, or coyotes howling. It was crying, tiny, trembling cries. Lost, weak, distant. I felt my hands tighten on the steering wheel. I told myself it couldn't be real. But Bramble sat up suddenly, ears twitching. And without hesitation, she leapt from the seat, pawing at the door like her life depended on it. I opened it. She ran straight into the woods. By the time I caught up, the sky was bleeding into pale blue. The sun had barely begun to rise, but already the fog clung low to the ground, thick and cold. Bramble stood just off the trail, nose to the ground, tail stiff. She was staring at a bush. Something was hanging from one of the thorned branches. I stepped closer, ducking under limbs heavy with dew. It was cloth. Old, torn, sun-bleached to a pale gray. I pulled it free, held it in my hands. It was flannel, blue and green. I knew it instantly. Daniel's shirt, one he used to wear almost daily, especially toward the end. I remembered how the elbows had frayed, how he always kept a pen tucked in the front pocket. I used to tease him about looking like a lumberjack from a postcard. Now, here it was, caught on a branch, dangling like a message. I looked down. Bramble was already ahead of me again, pushing toward the deeper part of the woods. Not toward the creek, toward the old grove, where the trees grow in tight circles, where the air feels too still. We found the hollow tree just past the edge of the grove. Its trunk had split long ago, probably from lightning or disease. Inside, where the heartwood had rotted out, something had been stashed, kept dry, or at least dry enough. A notebook. The spine was swollen with moisture. The pages stuck together in places, mold blooming along the edges. I peeled it open carefully. my heart pounding harder with each soaked page I turned. It was Daniel's handwriting, slanted, sharp, familiar. The first few entries were dated about a week after the puppies were born. He sounded tired, but something else too, paranoid. Sadie's been barking at the same tree every night, always the same one, east side of the cabin. There's something in the woods. I can't see it, but I feel it. She won't go near the clearing anymore. She growls at nothing and the pups hide under the porch. Then, scribbled messily across a 2-page spread, they come at night. Sadie knows. She sees them before I do. The tree feeds on pain. I stared at the words. Bramble whined beside me. Her body was low to the ground, tail between her legs. I flipped further. The entries became erratic, unstable, like his mind was unraveling. I buried the wrong one. It's still here. I hear it breathing. Sometimes I think it's inside the tree. Then finally, if I don't stop it, it'll take them all. I had to do it. Please, someone understand. The pages after that were too moldy to read. The ink had run like tears. I dropped the notebook and staggered back. My vision blurred. Had Daniel done it to protect them? Had he tried to stop whatever it was? Did I leave before understanding any of it? Bramble led me back to the original tree, the one where I found Sadie and her puppies all those years ago. She pawed at the soil again. This time I didn't stop her. I got down and helped. We dug for nearly an hour, damp earth under my fingernails, a sour smell rising from the roots. Finally, we uncovered bones, small, delicate, a pup's rib cage, a fractured femur, a tiny jaw. I counted 4 skulls, but we'd had 5 puppies. 5. My stomach twisted. I stared into the shallow grave, numb. The bones were tangled with rope, just as I remembered, but one of them was missing. I looked at Bramble. She was already looking at me, like she knew, like she remembered somehow. But how could she? She wasn't even born then. The storm rolled in just before dusk. Clouds churned like bruises overhead, thunder rumbling low and long. I made it back to the old cabin just as the rain began to pour. The place was still boarded up, the lock rusted, the porch half collapsed. I forced the door open with my shoulder, and Bramble dashed inside ahead of me. Dust choked the air. Everything smelled of mold, old wood, and time. I hadn't set foot in here since the night Daniel vanished. His jacket still hung on a hook by the door. A cracked coffee mug sat on the mantel. A single dog collar, Sadie's, rested beside it, buckle rusted. Bramble paced the room, sniffing every corner, her movements twitchy. I lit a few candles from my emergency kit and sat near the fireplace, shivering. That's when it happened. The radio. It had been dead for years. The dial was cracked, cord frayed, no batteries, no power, but it crackled to life, a low hum at first, then static, then a voice, garbled, distorted, but real. I didn't leave them. Then silence. The hair on my arms rose. The radio buzzed again. I buried what I could. And then, nothing but static. I backed away, heart hammering. A loud thump hit the porch. Bramble barked, racing to the window. I ran to her side and peered out. Something moved between the trees, just beyond the clearing, low to the ground, broad-shouldered, covered in matted black fur. But not quite a dog, not quite anything I'd seen. It turned its head toward the window. Eyes caught the candlelight. Then it vanished. Gone. No sound. No footprints. Just empty rain. I sank to the floor, breathing hard. Bramble was pacing again, sniffing the warped boards near the hearth. Then she stopped and scratched. Fast, hard, desperate. I grabbed a crowbar from my bag and began prying the boards. Loose. Beneath the floor, tucked between insulation and dirt, was a photograph. Water-stained but intact. It was us. Daniel, me, Sadie, and the puppies. But something was wrong. There were 5 of them, yes, but one had eyes unlike the others, darker, wider, like it wasn't quite right. I stared at its face. Something about it unsettled me. Something about the way it looked directly into the camera. I tried to remember that day, tried to place a name to that fifth puppy, but I couldn't. It was like that memory had been erased, or maybe hidden. I whispered, "What happened to the fifth one?" That's when the scratching began. Not from Bramble, not from outside, from inside the walls. I left Bramble asleep in the back of the truck and walked the mile down the gravel road to the only neighbor still living out here. Mrs. Hargrove was 92 now, maybe older. Her house had always looked like it leaned a little to the left, like it was listening. Ivy climbed halfway up the porch posts and rust bloomed across the gutters. She answered the door in a quilted robe, holding a shotgun like a walking stick. "Didn't think I'd ever see you again," she said, squinting. "Figured the whole family left for good after that mess." "I need to ask you about Daniel," I said. "And Sadie." Her eyes narrowed. "Come inside." She poured tea like it was an act of war, splashy, impatient. Her living room smelled like mothballs and pine cleaner. "I remember that night," she said, not bothering to sit. "Storm rolled in around 9, power cut out by 10. I looked out the window, saw the trees lighting up like a carnival. I thought, lightning maybe." She paused. "But it wasn't lightning. It was green." I froze. "Green?" She nodded. "Like swamp gas, like something pulling power straight from the roots." "And Sadie?" She went still. I heard her howling. She said softly. Not barking, howling. Long, broken sounds. Like something was being taken from her. Like she was watching something. She couldn't stop. My throat closed. "She called it the mourning tree," she said, pointing one bony finger out toward the woods. "My grandmother used to warn me about it, said things buried there didn't stay dead. Said it grows on grief." I shook my head. "But it's just a tree." "No," she said, cutting me off. "It's a marker for something older, something that sleeps until it's fed." "Fed what?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Loss." Back at the cabin, I opened the journal again. The last few legible pages had fused together, but I managed to peel them apart using steam from a kettle. The ink was smudged but readable under a flashlight. Daniel's words. One of the pups was different. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't play, wouldn't sleep. Just stared at the tree. Every night. Sadie growled at it. Wouldn't let it nurse unless I held her still. Then it disappeared. No tracks, no blood, just gone. My mouth went dry. He hadn't killed it, he'd lost it, and the night he vanished. Maybe he went looking. Bramble started growling again. Low, broken, primal. She was at the window, hackles raised. I followed her line of sight and felt my spine stiffen. There, at the edge of the trees, stood a shape. Canine. But wrong. Taller. Lankier. Limbs too long. Head tilted too far, like it was listening with its bones. Its eyes glinted green. Not red. Not yellow. Green. Then it vanished behind the trees in a blur of motion. Bramble barked, lunging at the window. I yanked her back. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at that photograph. Me, Daniel, Sadie, and the 5 pups. I remembered. Something else. The last time I spoke to Daniel, he wasn't angry. He was afraid. He'd told me something I hadn't understood back then. "Grief's not just a feeling," he said. "It lives in the bones, grows like roots. If you don't bury it right, it grows back wrong." At the time, I thought it was just metaphor. Something poetic from a man barely keeping it together. But now I wasn't so sure. Just before dawn, Bramble stood up suddenly and began pacing the door. Her nails clicked against the old floorboards. "Like ticking," she whined, then looked at me. I followed her out into the woods, flashlight and journal in hand. We reached the old clearing just as the sun crept over the hills. Mist clung to the grass like a memory. Bramble stopped in front of the original tree. Her tail wagged once, slowly. Then she began sniffing around the base again, pushing aside brambles with her snout. That's when I saw it, a circle of stones, half buried under moss and leaves. Some had symbols etched into them, runes maybe. or just Daniel's desperate scrawl. But the circle had been broken. One stone had been split in half. Another was missing completely. Something had disturbed it. Maybe the storm, or maybe something else. I looked at Bramble. He was trying to bind it, I whispered, not kill it. She stared at me, and then she ran. She disappeared before I could catch up. One moment she was just ahead on the trail, tail flashing between trees. The next, gone. I called for her, over and over. The woods swallowed my voice. Then I heard it. Barking, panicked, furious, echoing off the trees like sonar. It was Bramble, and she was far too deep in the woods, too far to reach quickly. I grabbed the flashlight, stuffed the journal in my pack, and ran, back toward the tree, back toward whatever was waiting. The clearing was darker than it should have been. Even with the morning sun behind me, it felt like dusk had fallen early. The air buzzed with something old and unfinished, like a song cut off mid-note. Bramble stood at the edge of the roots, circling low, her body taut and trembling. Then I saw it. The creature stepped forward. It moved like a dog, at first, loping, unsteady, but its legs bent too far. Its spine arched unnaturally. The fur was patchy, clinging to a body too thin, too long. It raised its head. Its eyes were not animal. They were human. A child's eyes, and somehow, heartbreakingly, Daniel's eyes. I stumbled back, breath locking in my chest. No, I said. No, it can't be. But deep down, I knew. This was the fifth pup, twisted, grown wrong, fused with something it never should have touched, tethered to pain like a lifeline. Its face was still half innocent beneath the hunger, beneath the ruin. It tilted its head. Recognition. Somehow it knew me. Bramble snarled, her body a barrier between us. The creature growled low, a sound like a child crying inside a cave, but it didn't attack. It shuddered. That's when I understood. Daniel hadn't abandoned anyone. He'd bound himself to this thing, to hold it here, to keep it from spreading, to trap it with his love and grief. But something, storm, time, erosion, had broken that seal, and now it was free. Almost, I dropped to my knees, fumbling with the journal. Pages fluttered in the breeze as if Daniel himself were urging me on. My fingers found the sketch, his diagram of the binding circle, the way the stones were meant to lie, the runes, the symbols, the old language he'd half invented, half discovered in some nightmare of desperation. I ran to the tree's base, pushing Bramble gently back. She didn't want to move, but she did. The stones were still there, cracked, displaced. I began to fix them, one by one. My hands bled as I dug through roots and rot. I smeared dirt across my face. I whispered his words under my breath, hoping they were enough. The creature howled, and I heard it, his voice, rising from the wind, faint but steady. Finish it. Let me go. The creature lunged, but Bramble barked, one sharp guttural warning, and it stopped short. She had something the others hadn't. No connection to this place, no tie to the tree, no blood in the soil. The thing recoiled from her, placed the final stone and stood. The circle was whole again. The clearing pulsed, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. I looked at the creature. It looked back. I took one step forward. It didn't run. You remember me? I whispered. Don't you? Its head tilted again. Its ribs heaved with uneven breath. You were never meant to carry this, I said. None of you were. You were just a baby. I held out my hand. Daniel didn't leave you. He didn't abandon anyone. He tried to save you. It took one hesitant step closer. You got pulled into something none of us understood, I said. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. My voice cracked. I was crying now, harder than I had in years. I hadn't realized how much I'd buried. Daniel, Sadie, all of it. I'd convinced myself walking away was survival, but it was just another kind of death. I forgive you, I said, tears dripping onto my shirt. Please, forgive us too. The creature leaned forward, and gently, like a memory being returned. It licked my hand. The contact sent a shiver through me. Cold and warm at once. Old pain and newborn light. It felt like forgiveness. It felt like grief surrendering. The wind howled through the clearing. Leaves rose in a spiral. The sky dimmed, and the creature walked into the circle. No resistance, no fear, just acceptance. Its body shimmered. And then, light. Blinding, clean. It wasn't fire, it wasn't storm, it was release. And when it cleared, the circle was empty. No bones, no fur, just the hush of the forest breathing again. I collapsed to my knees, exhausted. Bramble limped over and curled beside me, resting her chin on my leg. For the first time in days, she made no sound. The sun broke through the trees. The clearing looked different now, lighter. Later, I found what was left beneath the roots. 3 small skulls. Sadie's collar, rusted. The snapped remains of Daniel's old watch. I buried them there, at the base of the tree. I laid the journal on top like a headstone. I didn't speak. There were no words left in me. Just the quiet knowledge that it was finally over. As Bramble and I walked away, the forest seemed to part for us. We were almost back at the truck when she paused, ears up, alert. She stared back into the trees. I followed her gaze, and for just a second, I saw something. A flicker, a tail, not Bramble's, not any living dogs, just a shimmer, like heat off asphalt, moving deeper into the woods. Gone before I could blink, I put a hand on her head. Rest now, little one, I whispered. She wagged once, slow and solemn. We got in the truck and drove away from the forest. I don't know if I'll ever go back, but sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and Bramble is curled at my feet, I still hear it. A 5th bark, echoing in the dark,